Hello and welcome to Prometheus Chats. I'm your host, Damion, and today I'm very lucky to have with us Ray Ellingsen of the Moving Pictures Media Group. I work closely with Ray, and I really love hearing all of his wonderful stories and his insights on navigating this crazy world of entertainment, especially filmmaking. I think all of you who are listening are going to really learn a lot and hear some really helpful and practical insights about how you can be more effective and be more successful in your career as a filmmaker. So with that, I'll stop babbling and let Ray do an introduction. Hey, Ray, how are you? Um,
I'm good. I'm good.
so tell
So
people a little bit about yourself. What do you do? And then we'll jump into your story.
sure. My name is Ray Ellingsen. I'm a partner at Moving Pictures Media Group. We're a full service production services company as well as a development company. And people have their own sort of euphemistic concept of what's production services, what's development. They're really, development's just a laundry list of stuff you have to put together in order to meet the requirements for production funding, and production services is all the minutia that goes on during production, like getting your insurance, getting your tax credits, getting deliverables for post. Those are the things that our company does.
Now, for some people, that makes total sense. For some people, they don't know that. They only know their creative side. I need to find money somehow. So
Sure.
I think the easiest way to probably get into this is maybe we start a little bit with your background, how you got into this, and then we can talk a little bit about now what that means going forward and how you work with filmmakers.
Sure, absolutely. I actually started out as a writer. I had sold a couple of screenplays, and I was actually sitting on the set of a film that I had written, and the producer came screeching up to the set and started screaming at people, and he thought there were too many people there, and he didn't want to pay people, and he pointed right at me, and he went, "Who the is that?" And the director went, "That's the writer. He's making changes to the script." And he's like, "He's the effing writer. We don't need him on. Get him out of here." And I got fired off of a film that I had written right there on the spot, and it was a random Thursday afternoon, and I remember going home and staring at my dog and thinking, "I really gotta rethink my career." And, at one point, being a writer, being, a director, being an actor, you're at the mercy of a lot of other people. You're a mooing cow in the herd, and I had this moment, this sort of light bulb moment, epiphany that I was like, "I don't wanna be a mooing cow." And so I started talking to friends who were producers and started to mostly line producers to start with. And I started realizing that there was a different way to make film. And as an independent filmmaker, I mean, I started out with Lloyd Kaufman over at Troma Pictures, and he's
Oh,
like the
wow.
independent of independent filmmakers. Him and Roger Corman sort of wrote the book on how to make movies, well, badly, but how to make movies. And so I'd had that background, and I went back and actually talked to Lloyd, and I said, I need to rethink my career. And he said, then start making your own damn movies. And
Mhm.
ironically, he has a book out called Make Your Own Damn Movie by Lloyd Kaufman. I encourage people to look at it. And so I started looking at what are the steps that I need in order to make a film. I did manage, took me about a year. I managed to produce a film with Kevin Smith, a film we did called Now You Know. And we got done, and I remember having a conversation with Kevin. We got along really well because we're both comic book nerds, and I remember thinking, "Well, Kevin, see you later. I guess you're off to do your next film." And he said, "If only it were that easy." And I went, at this moment, I was like, "Wait, what?" And I said, You're Kevin Smith." And he goes, "You think that carries some currency?" And I went, "Well, wait a minute." So he goes, "Look, I got to do the same thing you do. I got to schlub around town and try to get my next movie going." And I thought, there's got to be a better way.
Mhm.
And so I had a friend who was an attorney over at Fox Searchlight. They have a development process that makes a lot of sense. And so I sort of borrowed from that as much as I could. And, really development, again, it's just a laundry list of stuff that you have to have in place in order to meet the requirements for production funding.
Mhm.
And so, and whether you're going to debt financing, which is how 90% of films are getting filmed, whether you're going to deficit financing, which is like going through Amazon or Hulu, or whether you're going through private equity, which everybody thinks they want until they get it. That's like Gulf Capital.
Yeah.
They all want to see the same things. They want to see risk mitigation, and they want to see collateral. Those are the two bookends of development. Everything in between is development to create a package so that you meet those requirements for production funding. Ironically, reason you and I know each other is because a big, huge portion in between those two bookends is building an audience in marketing. And so, that's a key component. People are like, oh, well, why am I doing that now? I'll do it once I get into film. Well, how do you convince a distributor to take on your film?
Mhm.
Oh, well, I'll get a lead actor. Why are and there's an interesting statistic that Film Profit, the analytics firm, came up with. They found out that they did a cross-section study of actors and how much revenue they generate for a film. And we're not talking about Tom Cruise or Tom Hanks. We're talking about the average actor.
Mhm.
How much revenue percentage do they generate based on their name? And the number is staggeringly low. It's 11%. So only 11% of your revenue return is due to an actor's name. Distributors know that, but then they push you to go get an actor.
Mhm.
Doesn't make a lot of sense. The other sort of, I guess the big portion of that would be audience. And if you can go, I have actually had this happen with a distributor. I had actors' names, I had people, and he was like sort of whole hum. I was sitting on a panel discussion at Toronto Film Festival, and one of the producers on that panel said, "Go build an audience." And so I went to a social media company. We built an audience. I went back about 4 months later to that distribution company, and I said, "Hey, you remember that project?" And he kind of like, "Yeah, I'll send it to legal." And I said, "Well, perhaps I forgot to mention we have 500,000 active followers on social media." He signed the deal with a minimum sales guarantee for the amount of the budget.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of key components that will get you to production, get you to financing so that you as a filmmaker who just wants to put your vision on screen will be able to do that. I'm sorry, Samuel Arkoff once said, the film business is 95% business and 5% film. And if more filmmakers understood that, they'd be much more successful. So I think, when you're talking to filmmakers, everybody just goes, oh, I had this great idea and I want to put it on the screen. That's 5%.
Mhm.
95% is the business side. And people have to learn as filmmakers, especially independent filmmakers, that they need to put on their business hat and actually turn this into an actual business.
That's a perfect segue. I mean, you dropped so many gems there. The one that I love, of course, is the audience piece, because the whole reason you get a big name is because they come with an audience, right? So it all kind of goes back to who's going to pay for this, who's going to buy it, and it's the audience. It's not necessarily the studio because they want to make money back. It's not the equity folks because they want to make money back. The bank is lending you the money, assuming you can make that money back, and the audience is the one who's going to help you do that.
Correct.
So I think those are really important things to nail home to folks, is that, to your point, a majority of the filmmaking business is actually business and not film. And so many times we see creatives mention, oh, but my vision, but they never thought about who's going to want to see their vision. Now, if you make art, it's great. And there's a place for that. And it definitely needs to exist. But art for the sake of art doesn't belong in the world of commerce then. Sometimes it works, most of the time it doesn't.
Well, and that's a great point. I mean, you get people, and this always happens. We get clients all the time who are like, "Oh, I just want to see it on the screen." You're like, "Great. Now you need to start thinking about why that's going to get to the screen because it's a beautiful vision and it's socially relevant." Nobody cares. It's like documentaries. Documentaries are powerful. I personally like documentaries. I've directed 2 of them, but they're not monetizable. Very rare instances.
Yep.
Netflix pays 30 cents on the dollar for a documentary. That means if you spend $100, they'll give you $30 back for the rights to it. So, people, those are labors of love. And if you have a message you want to give to the world and you don't care if money comes back and you're, an entrepreneur or you're Elon Musk and you can afford it, God bless you. But most people need to treat the film business like a business. And yes, they want to get a message out, but they need to think about getting their second message out. And if you get your first message out and make $0, you're never going to get to speak again.
I mean, again, it's really, it should go without saying, but it's really important to note that so many times in this business, people ignore the business aspect of it for the creativity. And creativity is a part, but not the whole. In your position, working with so many filmmakers and helping them navigate that business part, because there are a lot of moving pieces and it's not necessarily intuitive for folks. What are the types of things that you look for when you're first determining which projects to move forward with, And second, how you help that filmmaker navigate kind of the tricky of get this in place, make sure you sign
Sure.
X, get your copyrights, all those sorts of things.
Sure. Yeah. That's part of the development services that our company provides. And there's a lot of development companies out there. We're not the only game in town. But if you're looking at what are the things we look at when somebody submits a project, I just want to know that it's marketable. And I don't care what genre it is. I've had some stories that I've read that I am definitely not, being a heterosexual white male in his 50s. I'm not the audience for half of these projects. But I look at some projects, I'm like, man, this needs to be made. I may not be the audience, but it's a great story. And so, looking for a good story, I don't care what the genre is, I don't care what the subject matter is, I don't care any of that. A well-written story is a well-written story. And I think that's the first key element or the core of any kind of film is having a good story behind it. And the second thing is it marketable? When we take on a client, we have a good relationship with Film Profit, the analytics firm. And we'll go up and we'll go, hey, is this project marketable? Is there an audience? And when we take on a client, in fact, you've been part of these vendor conferences that we've had. When
Mhm.
we take on a client, we bring in all the vendors. We bring in the people who are doing the budgets and schedules. We bring in the people who are doing the graphic art and the websites. We bring on the people who are doing the legal formation. We bring on the people who are doing the analytics, the social media, which is how you always get roped into these
Yes.
sort of stuff. But and you've been on those vendor calls. We do not allow clients on those vendor calls for obvious reasons because we're not the most politically correct in those conversations because we all know each other. But we do get down to the core of the story. We get down to the marketability. We get down to the budget. We get down to the, methodology of deployment and execution into the marketplace. All those things happen. And those are things when I go back to a client, I go, okay, here's the game plan. Here's how we're going to do this. We're going to do analytics from Film Profit. We're going to bring on Prometheus to do some social media and build an audience. We're going to go ahead and get a budget schedule done from Factor Media Group. We're going to bring on all your legal formation so that you have a legal entity that you can transfer the intellectual property rights into so that you're protected and your intellectual property is protected. We're going to bring on a producer's representative to secure you distribution in the worldwide marketplace in any and all media. Those are all the things and those are the steps that you put together to build your film. And, when it comes down to, if, somebody was I'm sitting on a panel discussion, and somebody's like, put all that into one word. "Oh, are you kidding me? But it was actually, pretty apt because there is one word, network. You're building a
Mhm.
network. And that's what you need to do if you're a filmmaker. It is not a lone exploration. Building a film is a collaborative effort. They always do this, it's a really trite saying, it takes a village to raise a child. That child is your film.
Mhm.
And it does take a village. It takes a lot of different people building a network, all working in concert to achieve a goal.
That just going through the list of what you said, it's it's a bajillion steps, and each of them underneath each of them, there's another step, right? Forming an LLC, for example, right? On the surface, yeah, but you have the organization articles. You have to make sure you have the taxpayer ID because when you're doing the filming and you're paying folks, and so getting a bank account and all of those sorts of things, there are so many steps underneath that before you've even started to film anything have to take place. And I think that's probably one of the things that is not seen by many people. They see, "Oh, I'm on set," or "Oh, I see the film," but they don't realize all of the things that have to take place for just that production part to happen before you even got to post and you're doing editing or anything.
There's a lot of logistics, and again, it goes back to Sam Markov. The film business is 95% business. Now, a lot of people look at this and they're just overwhelmed. I just had a client the other day. I was on the phone with them. I could just see the deer in the headlights glazing over. Oh God, I'm in over my head. Look. And we really break it down. In fact, on our website, we have an article that was published in PRO Newswire and it's 7 steps to development or something. I should know the title since I wrote it years ago, but and that just breaks down sort of here's how to look at it so that it doesn't look like a million moving parts moving all at once like a helicopter all working, against each other. it breaks it down into its basic components. And again, it comes down to you're just building a network. I don't know everything. Somebody once asked a colleague of mine, what does a producer do? And he kind of laughed and he was like, oh God, he produced 5 films with me. And we looked at each other. We sort of smiled. He was a adjunct professor at Tulane University, and I was a guest speaker. And this person in the audience was like, "What does a producer do?" And we had this moment, and my colleague said, "Tell you what, we're going to do a role playing game." And everybody kind of looked at us funny, and I was kind of looking at my friend funny. And he said, "Okay, Ray, you're the AD on this film." Okay. And he went back to the person in the audience, said, "Go ahead and ask me a question about the camera department or about the directing department." And she said, "Okay, what cameras are you using on this film?" And and my friend John Luke went, "That is an excellent question. Hey, Ray, what cameras are we using on this film?" And that is really what a producer does. They don't have to know everything. They just need to know where the bodies are buried. They need to know who the department heads are, who know things, who are smarter than they are. And they just need to be able to tap into that information. So the same going back to developing and producing a film, it's not that overwhelming if you organize it and you have people who are smarter than you running different departments so that everything runs smoothly and everybody knows what they're doing because that's their wheelhouse. Like, I don't think about social media. I call you
Mhm.
because you're much smarter than I am. You know? So, but that's the point is you hire professionals and you create a network so that you don't have to take on that overwhelming avalanche of information that's just crumbling down around you.
I think probably one of the best descriptions of a producer I've heard. I remember 25 years ago ish when I was just getting into this business, and I got these books. It was like, movie making for dummies, or I think it was like the film and TV business. That might have actually been the title. And reading it, it's defining what all the roles are on a film or a TV show. And it had producer. And then the first line it said, probably one of the most nebulous titles in entertainment, right? Because sometimes the producer is deeply involved in the creative. Sometimes the producer is organizing everything. Sometimes the producer is doing all of those things. Sometimes the producer is making sure that the money is coming in and somebody else is doing those other things. And they just need to know who they need to get the money to. And so I think one of the things about being a producer that's great is that to some extent you define what that role is and you can lean into your strengths. But in doing that, you still have to understand the mechanics and the moving parts of the business. So even if you can't do all of those roles, you know where they all plug in. And to your point, where the bodies are buried, right? Because at the end of the day, there needs to be some unifying factor that's moving everything forward. And that's really where the producer's role comes in.
It really is. And, I have a lot of filmmakers that come to me and they're like, I'm just a writer. I'm like, well, if you want to see your film on the screen as an independent filmmaker, you're now a producer. And, they look at me like, oh, I don't know how to produce her. You don't know how to produce. Do you know somebody who owns a camera? Yeah, I got a great friend who's a DP. Camera department's taken care of. You know any act? Oh yeah, I have a friend who knows so and so. Case and by the way, you can hire a casting director and they'll go ahead and help you out with that. You know how to do a budget and schedule? No. Do you know anybody who can do a budget and schedule? No, do you? Yeah, I do. So now you have access to a budget and schedule. So it's just building a network. You don't have to know everything. You just need to know where to find everything, and you need to be accountable at the end of the day.
What's one of the things that you see a lot when people come to you just as a filmmaker that it's a very common mistake? They don't know and they just come in and they're really excited, but they're missing some key element. Like what's that mistake that you see really commonly?
I think, and it's not so much a key element. I sat on a panel discussion once and 400 people in the auditorium and this person stood up. We talked about development and, other people on the panel had, talked about it as well. And this guy stood up and he got the microphone and he said, I don't need any of that. I just need financing. And, okay. And unfortunately, the moderator pointed at me to address it. And I was like, oh God. I said, okay, you don't need anything. You just need financing. Yeah. Do you have a budget and a schedule? No. Well, then how much money are you getting? Well, it's going to be about $10 million based on, well, that's what it's going to cost, but you don't have a budget and schedule. No, I just need the financing. Okay. Do you have an audience? Have you built social media? Do you have, like I went through this thing. He's like, I don't need it. I just need financing. And I was like, okay. Financing requires the following things. They want to see risk mitigation. They want to see collateral. If you don't provide that to them, it's like buying a house. You want to buy a house, they're going to
Mhm.
go ahead and do an appraisal on the house, and the house is worth 100,000. You're asking for 500,000. Oh yeah, it's not going to happen. But if they feel that the value of the house exceeds what they're loaning you, that's why you have to put 5 to 20% down on a house, then they're
Mhm.
willing to take the chance, know that the house will probably appreciate unless you burn it down. They'll require you get insurance in case that happens, so they still get paid out. But as long as their risk is not excessive, they will finance and you can buy a house. Same thing with a film. And through all that, he was like, "Look, I just need financing." I went, "Okay, answer me one more question." He said, "Okay." I go, "How long you been trying to get this film made under this, current mindset?" He goes, 7 years. I was like, "How's that working out for you?" He actually got so mad he threw the mic and hit this girl in the head, like
Oh
fast
no.
forward. Yeah. And
Oh.
she saved the moment because she picked up the mic and she goes, "Well, now that I have the mic, can I ask a question?" So, disastrous situation averted. But the point is, to your question, what's the key element? The key element is your mindset. The key element is you get so locked into this is all I need that, and if it's not getting done in 6 months, you need to rethink that. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results.
Mhm.
So the key element is be open-minded to an approach that maybe you haven't thought of, and be open-minded to bringing in a network to help you achieve that goal. I don't
That
know if that
is
answers your question.
no, that answers it perfectly. It's so on our end, Prometheus, we bring in people to help them do strategy, figure out the data. And it's funny, one of the biggest pushbacks we get from people sometimes is, I kid you not, I had a producer tell me this. I don't care about the audience. It doesn't matter. I just think about the show. And I said, okay, well, that's great. Then who's going to watch your show? Well, it's going to be these people. How do you know that? Well, because I think that those are the people who are going to like it. So you don't know that, right? You just want those people. So what happens if those people don't watch? What do you do? Do you know who else you would be reaching? Or are there secondary audiences who might want to watch your show? And there was a pause, and I'd never thought of that. Well, I just don't want to be making stuff, with paint by numbers with the data. And it leads to then, well, let me tell you how data works. Data is not going to make your creativity for you. It's it's like the gauges in your car. You're setting the direction and where it's going, but it's telling you, do you have enough gas to get there? It's dark, turn the light so you can see, hey, your tire pressure is low. You're going this fast, so you'll get there at about this time, or you're going this fast and you'll get there a little bit later. But all of those things are helping you get to your destination. And if you have GPS, you can start to pick multiple routes to get there. But at the end of the day, you can decide, do you want to take that route or not? Do you want to go faster or slower? Do you want to drive in the dark or not? And that's what data is. It's not replacing your gut. It's not changing your creativity. What it's doing is informing and letting you be more strategic in how you get to that destination. And I think when it gets to you, there's a lot of that as well. That's what the banks are looking for. Are you strategic in getting us to that destination such that we can mitigate risk?
Sure. And to your point, also what you do, and one of the reasons that I really have gravitated toward your company is, it's one of those things that Ribbo Media does digital marketing, digital audience analysis, and you know them as well, I think.
Yep.
And one of the things that Ash Grayson, the founder of that, said to me once is he said, "Look, the key to what we do is we not only access an audience through social media, we not only identify the audience through social media, we access them in real time." And the reason I like your company is because you can access an audience in real time. And that is super valuable to me as a filmmaker when I'm going to a distributor and saying, "Hey, look, I have 500,000 people. I have whatever the number is that are active followers." That's not, that's not a purchased audience. That's not that's real time people who are engaged as, the term I think brought out was super fans.
Mhm.
And super fans, example of that is when Marvel decided to take a third rate tertiary character in their universe and make a film with it with Robert Downey Jr., who is a recovering alcoholic, and create the film Iron Man. It was a massive success. Why? Because they had a core audience of super fans. Well, the world at large was like, Iron what? Oh, and that drunk guy that used to be an actor? What the hell? The core audience of super fans, they knew who Iron Man was. They'd followed him for years. They were so excited and thrilled that they went out and told everybody they knew, "Oh my god, they're making Iron Man. You have to see it." And that creating that core group of super fans is part of the it's part of what we look for when we're working with companies like yours is we want to build an audience, but we don't just want to build numbers. We want to build a core audience of super fans that are going to go out and push that word and go, "Oh my god, you've got to see this film."
Exactly. And that at the end of the day, when you think about what a film is supposed to do, it's supposed to connect with an audience. And you and I have both taught classes for Mara McCann and her decision maker meetings group. And one of the things that I like to start off my presentations with is sometimes people will tell me they don't want the audience, they don't care about it. But then what I'll show them is that's literally Hollywood's secret weapon. Why do you think comic book movies are made? Because they come with a built-in audience. Why do you think books get
Absolutely.
adapted or TV shows get adapted or bring in big names? Because people know them and they come with an audience. And then look at all for everything Martin Scorsese says about comic book movies. If you follow his quotes, he says that the audience is the ultimate judge in what you do. And if you ignore them, you have no movie.
Yeah.
He knows
Yeah.
that. And so, I mean, they're just quote after quote. Steven Spielberg will say it. And so I go through and show them those quotes, and suddenly people start to realize, oh, wait a minute. The through line is all of them are able to bring people in to whatever world they're creating and get them to either share it, watch it, buy it, do something that creates revenue for the studio or whoever produced it.
Well, I think, Stephen King said it best. He was talking about one of the films that he had done that they'd made to a movie that was terrible because most of them are. They do not adapt. They just don't. I mean, I think the first iteration of It was brilliant. I think that, what Stephen King had said though was, he said, all these people in Hollywood have made versions of my books. And he said, nobody has ever come back and thanked me for their success. Even though they were terrible, they take the credit for it. He goes, I just want to say this, you're welcome. People go to see a Stephen King film because the book and the audience and it's him.
Mhm.
Even though the movie's just god awful,
It's still
they'll
Stephen
still go
King.
s yeah, it's Stephen King. So, yeah, so you do have an audience, and you are correct. That's why comic books and novelization turned to film. They have a built-in audience already, and I think when we're talking to new filmmakers, you need to go, "Hey, look, you're not dealing with a known property. You need to make this a known property," and the way to do that is to building an audience.
Yep. It's so we talked a lot about the business and some of the serious stuff, but to be honest, there are some fun moments in the background. It's not all just looking at spreadsheets and mitigating risk. Let's do a little story time because I know you have some great stories. In this, we all have like our battle stories and kind of like that one thing that's like it ends up just being a comedy of errors where it's like a bunch of mistakes everywhere, but then in the end it ends up working out. But getting through it is just like, really, is this happening? Gonna put you on the spot for a sec. If you could pick any one project, and you don't have to name the project, but any one project that you've worked on that has just been like a comedy of errors and everything seemed like this can't be really happening. Like it should have been a sitcom or like a comedy all on its own. What would that be? Can you share that
I
experience with us?
did I produced a film called Faded Memories, and I had actually seen this short at the Toronto Film Festival, and this 16-year-old girl won the festival with her short. She didn't win best short, she won the festival with her short,
Mhm.
and I was pretty taken with what she did for no money. It was this, teenage angst story, and so it started out I should have known it was gonna go downhill because the way it started. I went to the hotel where she was staying, and I went to the desk, and I said, "Hey, I'd like to get a hold of Anne-Sophie Dutoit," and she kinda looked at me funny, and then she goes, "Okay, I can't give you the room number, but I'll ring the room for you," and I got the room, and about that time, I was like, I'm at a hotel calling on a 16-year-old girl. Oh, yeah, okay, I see it now." And her father answered. That wasn't fun, but and his first words were, Who is this?" And I told him, and he said, "Where are you?" And I said, "Down the lobby." He goes, "I'll be right down." And I went, "Oh, God." So he came down, and he was, protective of his 16-year-old daughter, and I would like, "Oh my god, I'm sorry, I didn't think about her age." I was thinking I was just really, I'd like to produce her film. And he was still a little skeptical. That was about 4 in the afternoon. At 1 in the morning, he invited his wife and daughter down to meet me in the lobby, and I wound up producing that film. But it was a 16-year-old girl. I never thought about I just thought she was an artist and she had a really great idea, and I wanted to produce her film. I didn't realize she was 16 and experiencing that teenage angst in real time herself. We had so many things happen on the set, and I had so many long talks with her where you'd have to kind of take her aside and go, "Okay, you gotta put on your big girl pants now and go make a movie." She was 16 and her lead actor was 19 or 20 at the time. We didn't think about there was this very intimate scene on the beach with them rolling around making out. And that, that was a kind of a question of not only ethics, but legality.
Mhm.
And he was really horrified, and she was sort of head over heels for this guy and kept wanting to do the same makeout scene over and over.
Oh, no.
Yeah,
Oh.
so and it just, it was funny because it was a comedy of errors, and, like, she got mad once and wouldn't come out of her trailer, and we're like, "Okay, you're the director, right? And we can't really do anything without you moving things forward." It turned out okay, and she learned a lot, I learned a lot. It was one of those things that she invited a bunch of her friends to play a role, and they just thought they're having a party at the production's expense, and I was the producer watching the money, like, dry up fast. I had obligations to Telefilm Canada to deliver. They wanted me to shoot in Canada, and I managed to tell them, "Hey, you do realize this takes place in Malibu, California. If you can, duplicate that beach in Toronto, let me know." But it was just logistics problems, it was creative issues, it was personality issues. But at the end of the day, we screened it at the Laemmle theaters. And the Laemmle on Sunset is
Mhm.
basically an outdoor mall. And there's a big courtyard, and it's 3 levels, and the Laemmle theater's on the 3rd level. I have a photograph when we did the premiere of girls, eh, teenage girls lined up around the outside or the inside interior of the 1st floor, up the escalator, the 2nd floor, up the escalator, 3rd floor, all waiting to see that.
Whoa. Wow.
So at the end of the day, and that film's done very well. At the end of the day, I had that moment. I got up on the roof. I got permission to get up on the roof of the mall, and I took that photo. And I still have it. And I was like, huh, I guess it was all worth it. But it wasn't until that moment that I realized that, okay, this was worth it. And I learned probably more from that film than I've learned on any film I've ever done.
That's a great story, not just because, like, it's funny and there are the other parts, but it reminds me of the saying that you learn more from your mistakes than the things you got right,
Mhm.
and sometimes you have to make the mistake to figure out what not to do, and so many times you have to fail in order to make that happen. In this case, luckily, you didn't fail, but you still had to have a lot of bumps along the road to learn those lessons.
Well, and one of the lessons I learned was when you're in the middle of it and you're in up to your neck, you've got to stop and remember why you started in the first place. And that gets lost. You get 3 weeks into production and everything's falling apart and people won't come out of their trailers and you're over budget and you're trying to, the camera melts literally from the heat.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah, we're shooting on film and it just melted the
Oh,
film on
no.
the camera. And, like you're having all these logistics issues and you have to stop at some point and go, I got to remember why I got into this in the first place. Cause otherwise it just becomes a snowball going downhill. And it
Mhm.
gets bigger and bigger and bigger and more problems. And yeah, I think you have to stop and take a breath and remember what you're doing. So
That perspective is huge. And it goes back to your earlier comment. It's all mindset, right? If
it
you
is.
take that perspective, then it helps you to focus your mindset on what your goal is and how you
Well,
want to.
I don't know if I have a background in martial arts and I used to teach self-defense. And
Mhm.
one of the things that I always taught to my students was, look, a physical conflict or fight, 95% of that is mindset. It's dealing with the superfluous emotions and feelings coursing through your veins in the moment of conflict. You've got anxiety and you've got adrenaline and fear and all these things. 95% of a fight is mindset. It's what's going on up here. 5% is the mechanics, the kicking and punching. I can teach that crap to monkeys.
Mhm.
That's the easy thing. The hard part is adjusting your mind so that you have the proper mindset to walk into something and walk away from it at the end. And I think as a filmmaker, you've got to walk in with the proper mindset and go, it's going to get overwhelming. But that's why I have a team. That's why I organize this. That's why, it's one of those things. It's like when you're breathing easy in pre-production, you're not really on a schedule yet. You're doing your shot list, you're doing all your, elements, you're getting all the things. That's when you can breathe and make decisions. But when the rubber meets the road and you're in the middle of it, that's not the time to make decisions. You made those decisions before. You just need to stick with them now.
Mhm. It makes it a lot easier because then you're not trying to build the plane while you're flying it.
A lot of filmmakers do that. They
Mhm.
don't think it through. Pre-production is pre-production for a reason. It's the organizational process so that when everything happens, you don't have to worry about it. It's funny. I told you I started out with Lloyd Kaufman,
Yeah.
and he would do pre-production. He would go, he on a whiteboard. He'd go, here's the list. And he made the list for the filmmaker, for the director. And in the beginning, I remember he'd tell every single filmmaker, he'd go, okay, just remember, there's a million things you can have, and there's a million things you can't have. Just so today we're going to figure out what those things are. And so inevitably, you'd put it together. And his job was, as a producer, to insulate the director in a bubble so that they could be creative. You give them all the tools they need to play with, and then you put them in a bubble and you let them go. Now, inevitably, it always happens in the middle of shooting, week 2, week somewhere. Director comes up and goes, I got to have a techno crane. I have this Luva crane, but I want a techno crane because I can get up and I can get this shot. My vision is, and the Lloyd would always go up and he go, yeah. I totally understand what you're saying. So do you remember we had this conversation? I said, there's a million things you can have, and there's a million things you can't have. Guess which one this is?
Yeah.
So, but that's all organization. And I think, again, we go back to filmmakers just want to see their vision on the screen.
Mhm.
It's not just that. There's a lot of things that happen. It's not overwhelming. It just needs to be organized.
What is an expectation for a filmmaker coming in trying to get development? So, like, I mean, development, you don't have money. You might have an idea or a concept or a script. What do you need them to have in place for you to even entertain that conversation?
I don't need them to have money. I need them to have mindset. And the money, we have finance facilitators that you can go to. They've got hundreds of our clients' development funding. They're unsecured lines of credit and loans. They can secure enough for development. Development can cost you $50,000 to $150,000, depending on what elements you need to put in place. And every development budget's different, just like every film budget's different. So I don't need a filmmaker to have a lot of resources. I don't need them to have money. I just need them to have the mindset to be responsible for their project. The one thing that I need is a person to come up and go, this is my project. I'm in it for the long haul. I'll do whatever's necessary within reason. I'll limit my expectations, but I'll also do everything I can to limit my risk. I know there's risk. But if I can find an exit strategy and a methodology of deployment to get me through it, then I'm willing to take that risk and that chance. And that's what I need from the filmmaker is their ability to commit to their project and believe in it. 99% of filmmakers like, I want to make this film. Okay, are you willing to sign on the dotted line and take a loan out for 50,000 to develop? Oh God, that's not my problem. I just want to see the film made. So if you don't believe in your film, how do you expect somebody else to believe in it?
Mhm.
And I think, that's the same thing. It's like I give them even with your, I consider you a vendor, one of the vendors that we use for development services. But we use a lot of them. We use analytics, we use, people who do budgets and schedules, we use people who build websites. And the friction I get is people like, well, why do I need analytics? It's going to cost me X number of dollars. I don't want to spend that. Well, you kind of need that because you need to know what your methodology of deployment is. You need to know who your audience is. You need to know a lot of data. Well, what do I need to do? Audience building. Why do I need social media? I have social media. I have like 160 followers. Okay. You're going to need a few more than that. Well, I'll just build out my own social media. I think you need to hire people who know more than you do to do that. Well, I have to spend money on that? Yeah. So, I mean, those are the things you ask what I need in a filmmaker. I need the filmmaker to have the mindset and to be able to take responsibility for their project because it's not going to get done magically. There's not, you don't shake the magic money tree and it all falls out and away you go. You look at filmmakers, you look at Lawrence Bender, who's a producer who produced all of Quentin Tarantino's films. I know Lawrence. He started out taking loans out and putting his name on the dotted line to make the picture happen.
Mhm.
And that's what it takes. You want to be just a creative, great, then go get an agent and hope you can sell your script. But if you want to see your vision on the screen, you need to take responsibility for it.
Yep. That's it's interesting. It's well, one of my mentors used to have a saying. They would say, "What's the difference between good and great? It's mindset." And it's very true. You can be good enough, but if you're great, you're willing to really back it and put your reputation, your money, whatever those things are on the line and do the legwork necessary to make it happen versus someone who's willing to accept whatever does happen, whether they do it or not. This has been great. I know that we've run a little bit over just because a couple of technical difficulties, but as always, I love hearing your stories, talking to you about all of the various things that you have going. And every time I talk to you, I feel like there's a new person that you know that I didn't know you knew.
I get the same from you though. Like we get to know either the same people or people that I've been trying to figure out how to get in their sphere. So
at the end of the show, we like to do a couple of things. There's a little advice part, but then there's a what would you do differently part. So if
Mhm.
you knew at the very beginning of your career, that one thing that if you knew now, you would tell everyone, make sure that you do this or make sure that you know this thing. What would that be?
Well, I jokingly said to you earlier, if I, knew then what I know now, I would tell my earlier self, don't get in the film business. It's actually not true. I think I would, I didn't look at this as a business until about my third film. I was just sort of stumbling through it, trying to make, the vision happen. So I think if I were to, and I don't normally dispense advice, but if I were to go back and tell myself, hey, do this, I would probably say treat it like a business from day one. And I think that would have saved me a lot of years of stumbling around trying to figure out how to do things.
I mean, to be honest, that's probably ground level for even the clients that I've been working with is helping people understand that it's a business and creativity is part of it, yes, but there's still the business. And so taking that time to take a film finance course or learning just how does the process of development work and do people get from A to B to C? Uh, those are all really crucial elements that will exponentially increase your likelihood of success in terms of getting things made and what you get made and prioritizing which projects you start with even.
Yeah. And, on that note, a little bit, film school, and I took a year of film school and then I left to go work for Lloyd Kaufman. Film school is interesting. People get out of film school, they have no idea how to make a movie, but they did learn something valuable that most of them do not take with them. And that is they learned how to build a network.
Mhm.
Because as other filmmakers, the problem is that network is all people who are on the same parallel line as you are. They all want to make their film. But in that process, you sort of get access to camera operators and sound people and all these other peripheral things. And people don't think about that. They look at crews as disposable. I had a I had a production manager that I was praying that she would not finally realize how talented she was because I knew I'd lose her. I got to work with her on 3 films and then she got Rennie Harlan snapped her up and I never saw her again. But I mean, people do not understand that when you get a crew member or you get people in your network, you get a producer's representative who can secure distribution for you. You get people who can do budgets and schedules, and ADs, assistant directors or unit production managers. Don't lose those people. Build your network and make sure that when you're building that network, you're not just getting what you want out of it, you're building their career too. It's taking responsibility for your network and helping them. Like when you and I talk, I appreciate that you provide services to our clients and to us as well. But I'm always very cognizant of the fact that what can I do to help build Prometheus as well? And so I think you have to have that mindset, going back to mindset again, you have to have that mindset when you build a network that it's not all for you. You're building a network for other people as well. And I think that's another piece of that puzzle that I wish I had learned early on. Treat it like a business, but part of having a business is building a core group or a network in that business that can help build the machine.
It's funny you mentioned that. That's something that I was talking to someone about recently. At the beginning of my career, it was very mercenary, right? Out for getting, I want to get promoted. I want to do this. I want to get and it was always me. And then at some point, I realized, what if I changed my perspective on that? And I thought, how can I make this a win for both of us? How can I help you? And in helping you, it does help me, right? Because when you succeed, now I can succeed as well. And so when I started taking that approach is when I really started to see suddenly people who I had worked for, who I saw as being mentors and being kind of, way up there on a pedestal, coming to me and asking me for advice. And that was bizarre. Hey, how did you get to do? And I thought, well, you're the one. I thought you had all of this, and I realized it was the difference in mindset. I would sometimes talk to people with no expectation of getting anything, and at the end of that conversation, say, "How can I help?" And inevitably, we'd start to work together, or maybe we didn't, but they'd know someone. Hey, you know what? We have this person who's looking for some strategy and analytics stuff. Can I send them your way? Sure, of course, send them my way. But it was really from taking the people first, and how can we be the tide that raises all ships? I say that way too much, but it's true. How can we be the tide that raises all ships versus, the one boat who's trying to get away and have the tide for himself?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a really important thing. And I think that's why, a lot of filmmakers should look at groups like Mara McCann's Zive. She's done nothing but create a network for everybody. And she's very generous with that network. And I think those are, there's other people out there in the industry that there's Nancy Fulton. She has a filmmakers or meetup group or something. Get involved in these groups and help build your network out. And they give you access to people like you. So
Exactly. And that's a great one. Mara, that's how we know each other, is through Mara.
through Mara,
Um,
yeah.
and Mara and I met each other randomly on Clubhouse or Zoom. I can't remember. It was maybe one of her networking classes. And then I had a couple folks that I wanted to introduce to her, and I introduced her, and then she introduced me to people. And now we continue that, but it's really helped both of our businesses thrive.
Yeah.
So to wrap everything up, if people want to learn more about the Moving Pictures Media Group and what you do there, Ray, where can they go?
Sure. We have a website. It's Moving Pictures MG as in mediagroup.com, I think. I don't go onto the site a lot, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is. And you can go ahead and explore it. There's a development page to it. There's, sort of history of what we do. There's webinars and things that you can view. Some of the different webinar sessions and classes that I've done, we post to it just to educate people. There's an article on 7 steps of development. Again, I think that's what it's called. But you can just go, it's movingpicturesmg.com. You can access us through groups like Zive. We work very closely with a lot of their sources.
Perfect. I'll put the website and those links in the show notes. But thank you so much, Ray. It's always a pleasure talking to you, and I look forward to more of this. And when I put it out, hopefully people really take you up on that, and they read those articles, because there is a lot of really helpful information in there. And especially if you're a new filmmaker, that information will make your life a lot easier, I have to say.
Well, we aim to please, but thank you for having me on.
Of course. That's it.
Perfect. Have a great day.
You too. Bye, Ray.
We'll see you.